Hello and welcome everyone. Let's get started. Today we are doing Accelo's best practices webinar focusing primarily on privacy. Now we run these webinars every 2 weeks and always looking forward to new suggestions. And as we go along, there's also a Q&A section here on the Zoom account. So feel free to throw some questions in there as we go and we'll try and get to them to the end. I'm your host, Tom. I'm an account manager here at Accelo. I'm also joined by my colleague and friend, Saga, who is a client success officer and an expert in all things Accelo. He will be running the session today. Really quickly, just going to go over the agenda from a high level here. There's lots of different areas within Accelo where you can manipulate the privacy options. And Saga's going to go through these one by one, beginning with the email integration kind of overview and how that affects privacy. Then kind of breaking it down, firstly at the individual user level, opening up activities, manipulating the privacy on individual activities as you go. Then of course, within your CRM at the company level and contact level. I've already mentioned the Q&A functionality. Again, we'll get to those at the end. Feel free to throw things in there. All right, let's get going.
Hey, thanks, Tom. So we're going to start with just a brief overview over that email integration. So a lot of our clients have Google Suite connected, or Office 365, or through one of their private SMTP servers. So our goal is, again, to bring in those emails relative to your clients, like your client communications and your client work. Again, we do not want to bring in your internal emails between staff members. So one thing to note is do not add a staff member as a contact, because that might be a reason why you might be bringing in internal emails into the system. Okay. We also will only be bringing in emails with matching contacts in the system or when we can match the domain name. So Tom is on my team at accelo.com and he's the same domain name. So if you have an Accelo company record and Sagar as a contact, then if Tom sends you an email, he might be automatically added into the system as per your preferences. So again, it really starts with looking at the different kind of settings that you have as an individual, and then looking at different parts of what we're going to be talking about today. So one thing to also keep in mind is request queues can have an exception. So, for just a quick background on request queues, these could be your sales at, info at, or for example, emailing into support at Accelo.com. These are your team inboxes that potentially should be having, again, new leads or potential leads coming into the system. So there might be exceptions to at least a second rule here. So if you give me 1 second, I'm going to pull up Accelo so we can do it live. Okay. So as we pull up one of our test deployments in Accelo, you'll notice some activities here. So again, as we're looking through this activity stream, sometimes you will recognize that you don't want certain activities listed in the stream. So maybe it's a particular individual. So the first thing we're going to look at is from an individual level. So for example, if I'm a managing director or an admin member or a director of an organization that doesn't want his or her emails brought into those streams, you can go ahead and expand your user preferences. Again, we came here by hovering over your user icon on the top right and hitting preferences. We then expanded privacy, email, and activity preferences, and we're really focusing on the first two here. So the first part is your default visibility. So by default, we're going to be bringing in all of those emails again relative to those client contacts in the system, but we're going to be using relationship permissions, which is again based on the company and contact level. So from a confidential, and suppose I do mark this as confidential, that means any further email that's brought into the system will be marked as confidential. So in Accelo, these privacy settings are based off secret and confidential that we're talking about a little bit more later, but confidential basically means that it'll be brought into the system. It'll be only viewable in terms of the content by individuals that are a part of that conversation. In other words, a thread. Okay, so again, it'll be brought in, it'll just say this is a confidential activity and this content is hidden. So it gives your team an idea that, again, there was some sort of activity that took place between these two individuals. Maybe I should check back with him or her about that if it relates to what I'm doing right now. The second preference in this is auto content creation. So as I was mentioning earlier, if Tom sends you an email and he may not be in your, your contact database at the time, it might automatically create that contact since we can match the domain name to an existing company in the system. So again, for example, at accelo.com. So it's important to keep in mind saying, why are these contacts being added automatically? Or for some individuals, you really enjoy that feature, so where you don't have to go in and manually add in each contact in the system, each time. So let's again take this one step further. So we're saying, okay, so what if some activities made it in the way of the system and we decided we don't want to necessarily have it, in the system, or at least marked, or at least shown to the staff on the team. So for example, they might be talking about a current colleague, they might be talking about an invoice that might be voided, or whichever reason or whatever reason. On the right-hand side of any activity, if you open it up, you'll track a visibility. And that is either, again, all for everyone, confidential, so it's confidential for only those that are a part of that conversation, or secret. So it will not even show up in the stream for anybody else besides those that are in, again, that conversation. So from an activity by activity basis, there might be some certain activities that you want to mark as, confidential or secret. Again, confidential meaning that it'll show up on the stream for others, but the content will be hidden. And secret means it will not even show up on the stream for others, and it'll just be marked as secret. Okay. So next, you can go ahead and create an activity. But what if you want to mark any new email as one of those options? So when you're sending out an email, you can mark that viewable access as either all for everyone, confidential as being confidential to, again, just you and whoever's in that thread, and secret meaning it will not even show up in that stream. Default means it'll be your default visibility for your user. Okay. So what about taking that and saying, we don't want any of these activities that are logged against this client or contact in the system? So that's where we go to the company record and we look at the different privacy relationships. So you can go in and we can track all the different privacy relationships. So as of right now, there are 2 existing relationships. We know that Sagar and any conversation related to this company should be confidential. And same with Tom. Any communication with this company should be confidential. So there are a couple of different levels. We could have it based on all contacts at example client or a specific contact. So the different examples are, this could be maybe a vendor or an HR company that you still want the conversations tracked in the system, but only to those that are involved in it. So that would be, again, for all individuals at example client. Now for a specific contact, maybe Jeff, our CEO, doesn't want any conversations shown to maybe a specific, admin member of another team. Again, most of his emails are transparent, but there's some specific individuals, maybe they're for a, personal conference or personal friend, that he doesn't want those emails to be brought into the system. He can go ahead and mark, maybe a specific context or contact example as either secret and confidential. So you can go through and add those in. So Nick, one of our colleagues, can either mark a secret or confidential relationship with contact example. So if it's secret, any activity related to a contact example will not show up in the stream for anybody else besides Nick Stevens. And if you go into confidential, that'll just mean that any, content will not be shown, but the actual activity will be. So it'll say this contact is hidden due to confidentiality. Okay. So you can say that and add those relationships again per client in the system. And again, for each of these levels, there are a lot of just different use cases and examples. So again, from an email integration, you shouldn't be bringing in any context that you don't want to have any email communications brought into Accelo for. You should possibly just even make them inactive contacts. And from a user level, you're looking at maybe an admin staff or potentially an operations manager or an accountant that doesn't want his or her emails brought into the system because it might negatively affect morale or whichever in terms of the financials, or again, we don't want to show that to the rest of the staff. Okay. Again, a lot of just different use cases, maybe specific activity. We don't want to show maybe an SOW or scope of work to all the staff, only those that are involved. And from a client or contact level, again, there might be, personal relationships, whether it be your husband and wife at another company, again, very commonly asked question, surprisingly. Or potentially you have other people that you just don't want to have those communications, like the accountant from the other team or the admin staff. So again, multiple different levels. There's different use cases for each and every one.